Good day, compensation management students. We are now in week 2, and as you can see, we're going to look at the first part of Unit 1. So this is our first formal presentation or lecture for compensation management. So what exactly is Unit 1A? This is what we're going to cover, hopefully, in this PowerPoint presentation or two. We're going to, as I said, be looking at the first unit, and these are the areas. We're going to clearly and concisely define compensation, look at what compensation management means and discusses the importance of this course, look at the various global definitions of compensation and how they may have changed. Of course, I think nearly every course we do, we look at PESTLE in some way, so examine the overall impact that the external environment, maybe using PESTLE, has on compensation management decisions, and then similarly looking at the internal environment and the impact that that has on compensation management decisions. So you will also find this on the course outline in that very first week, or at the beginning of this week, you will see clearly what we're covering. So let's go. What is compensation? So let's not think about, just what this course is about, but the root word. And of course, the root word comes from to compensate. And when we hear the word compensate, it's interesting what comes to mind. So the original Latin word is compensat, and it means weighed against. Now, you don't have to learn all this. I'm just trying to give you an overview of the different terms in compensation, or rather where the word has come from, so we can better understand what we're looking at. So weighed against. So again, if we think about when we hear the word compensation, we might think, he was compensated for his loss, or he was compensated for his injury. And there tends to be like a give to get, yeah? Does that make sense? So in the English language as we know it, compensation generally means something that counterbalances or offsets, and this is an interesting way of looking at it, makes up for something else. So if we think that a man was compensated because he was injured, he is getting something to make up for something else. So that's, and there usually tends to be a kind of negative connotation, that something bad happened and you're compensated in return, which is a kind of an interesting way of looking at it, because are we suggesting that work is something bad? Let's hope not. But generally, if we're just using this word in a kind of a general sense, not in terms of compensation management, usually it means something that makes up for something else, which I guess in a nutshell is the foundation of the employment relationship. So let's just, again, this is not things you need to know, just to get a different view of how different countries look at it. So in China, and you all know that they use traditional characters in how they write, their symbols are logs and water. So for them, compensation actually means the necessities of life, which I guess might be fire to cook, and of course water that we all need, yeah? Or fire to keep warm, or fire to keep safe. So it's interesting that for them, compensation is really all about having the necessities of life. In today's world, however, this has changed a little bit. And I may be pronouncing these things terribly wrong, apologies if I am, but daiyu is used, and it actually refers to how you are being treated. So when they talk about compensation now in a modern China, in a sort of working environment, it's not just the money you get, but how you're treated generally. So this would include your wages, but also what benefits you might have, what training opportunities, what even opportunities for development. So it's a lot broader than, again, how we traditionally look at compensation in the workplace. Japan, kaiyuyo. This is made up of two separate characters, meaning giving something from a superior to a subordinate. Now, we know this is a very different society and how people enact with each other and treat with each other. But for them, compensation is the superior giving something to a subordinate. And in the business world of Japan, the word hoisayu, again, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing these incorrectly, it actually means a reward, and there's no association with a superior. So one early kind of way of looking at it is a superior giving the subordinate something. And in now modern business Japan, it's actually a reward for something. So we're kind of seeing how all these different terms kind of all maybe have a lot to do with how we should truly look at compensation. Giving something to a subordinate, rewarding, how people are treated, and not just necessarily the dollar. So compensation and this is a big, big point, compensation does not mean the same thing to everybody. But how people view compensation affects how they behave at work. So what I might think is a fair compensation, you may not think is a fair compensation, but we both will agree that how we are compensated or how we view compensation, whether we think it's fair or equitable, and we'll talk about those terms a lot in this course, that will affect how we behave at work. So in a nutshell, if we think that we are woefully undercompensated, that may affect how we work. If we think we are overly compensated, that too may affect how we work, even though compensation may mean different things to different people. So let's go over the basic dictionary. So again, all of that was just to kind of set the stage. You will never get a question saying, what does the Japanese define compensation as? Never, okay? But let's move forward from here. Compensation, dictionary.com, something given or received as an equivalent for services, debt, loss, injury, suffering, etc. Now, I hope to God you all don't think of your work as suffering or injury or a loss. I really don't. But as it starts, it is something given or received as an equivalent for service. Fair enough? So it's something you get for giving something. Let's be clear that dictionary.com is not an academic source. It's just, again, to build a foundation of where we're going. Patriotsoftware.com, they're getting a little bit more specific in this definition. So that compensation is the total cash and non-cash payments that you give to an employee in exchange for the work they do for your business. So let's go through that again. It is the total cash and non-cash payments that you give to an employee in exchange for their work they do, for the work they do for your business. So this is getting immediately into an exchange. So someone's doing something for someone, which is the previous definition as well. And it talks about cash as well as non-cash payments. Of course, we're going to get into what that means later on. So hrguide.com, again, none of these are academic sources, but they're okay to be referenced. Compensation is a systematic approach to providing monetary value to employees in exchange for work performed. So we're taking this a whole different street here. Let's go again. It is a systematic approach, which implies there's a system, and we're using it, to provide monetary value to employees in exchange for work performed. So when we get into this whole word value, that's opening up a whole different can of worms here in terms of equitably and fairness and subjectivity and objectivity. But the idea is that there is some approach that is very systematic in its format of trying to assign a value to how much employees are getting for the work that they do. Yeah? So somebody had to decide, you are my admin assistant, you are worth this amount. That systematic approach to determining that is part of what compensation is. Not a vikey because then that would not be systematic. And then the textbook that is assigned to this course, their definition is very clear and perhaps very broad. Compensation refers to all forms of financial returns and tangible services and benefits that employees receive as part of an employment relationship. So that's Milkovich and Newman. You'll see references to that, of course, on the course outline, that textbook. So once again, it's all forms of returns financially and tangible, as in physical things you can hold on to, services and benefits that employees receive as part of the employment relationship. So it's a pretty standard type of definition of compensation. It covers both, cash and non-cash. So it looks obviously at benefits and services. And some of you might be thinking, benefits and services? I don't get any of those, but you may well do and don't know. Or of course, we will explore all the possible ones that are available out there. Right, so of course this course is not about compensation, it's about compensation management. So this is where we take a big U-turn almost. Okay, so let's try and define what this term means. So the compensation management is the management of compensation systems that support the achievement of organizational objectives. So There is a lot going on here. Let's take this simple definition again. The management of compensation systems that support the achievement of organizational objectives. And as good HR people, you all will already know that everything we do is to support the achievement of organizational objectives. So you're going to get sick of me you're going to get sick of me saying that. You're going to get sick of hearing me say that. So what does this definition actually assume? So let's just take a look at it again. The first thing it assumes is that there are actually organizational objectives that we would like to achieve. Now, again, this is like Management 101 or 125. This is as basic as it comes. Every organization is supposed to have very clear objectives of what it would like to achieve. But we all know that this may not be the case. We know that organizations sometimes are not clear on their objectives, or only a few people know what the objectives are, or the objectives seem to be about make $100,000 a day and no kind of plan as to how to get there. So this is in itself quite shaky. This definition also assumes that there are compensation systems that support these objectives or the achievement of these objectives. So what does that mean? There actually are going to be principles and procedures and methods that govern compensation and what should happen. And of course, these need to be managed properly. So what we're trying to say here is there need to be all sorts of procedures and policies and methods about how compensation is derived and designed and implemented and actioned, and that these compensation methods and policies and procedures, or systems as they say, should all be assisting the organization to achieve their objectives. So that's the definition again. What might be an easy way to look at this is, let's look at training. Obviously, an organization would have training to help achieve its objectives. You would not send, even though we know it happens, you should not send someone to a training that has nothing to do with what they do. Any training that you send somebody to do should immediately have a positive impact on an organization's objectives. And I'm saying the exact same thing for compensation. We need to have systems, policies, and procedures in place in how we manage compensation. So how we decide what people would be compensated, how they're going to be compensated, how they'll be rewarded, what benefits they will get, but not just to have it, that these choices we make in determining and designing compensation should have a positive impact on us achieving our organizational objectives. Now, for those of you in HR in Trinidad and Tobago, you would know that this does not happen that much. We have compensation. Some organizations have no compensation management in place. We just know, okay, that's how much people have to be paid. That's the wage scale. But how did that wage scale even evolve is what compensation management is about. How that has been updated and what it looks like and if it makes sense in itself is compensation management. But again, it's not just about having those. Is how we're compensating people actually helping us to achieve objectives? If the answer is no, then we ain't doing compensation management properly. I hope we got that. So the last little thing we're going to look at today, and I may have to go into 2 PowerPoints here, is to look at the impact that the external environment has on compensation management decisions. Because of course, no organization operates in a bubble. They are all being impacted or affected by the external environment. And of course, many of you will know what a PESTLE is. You can see straight at the bottom, it stands for political, economic, sociological. Well, there are all kind of different ways. And all this is that PESTLE is a framework that can help us audit the environment that we're in to kind of see which area may have the most impact on our organization. So in terms of compensation, there are of course lots of areas that could have an impact on the organization. So think about this for a minute. I'm going to end this PowerPoint now, but you will follow quickly on the next link.